Hi guys, Finch here, and it is time to do a club comparison which I've been wanting to do for a number of weeks now. And that is pit the new Cobra King 1-length irons against my current PSi Tour irons. Now the new forged iron from Cobra has been brought out very specifically because they have signed Bryson DeChambeau. Now, as most people know, Bryson DeChambeau is nicknamed the golf scientist, and for good reason. He thinks about the game in ways that not many people have done before, and not many people would have the energy to do now. He approaches the game in a very, very different manner to most people. And therefore, when Cobra brought these irons out, I was pretty skeptical. In my mind, if you sign a player, so Cobra signing Bryson DeChambeau, who is known for playing 1-length clubs, then you're almost forced into producing a club for that one player. And then releasing it out on the main market, I was a little bit... I wasn't too sure about how it would actually work, how it would actually fit. So what I did is I put those irons in my bag, took them straight out onto the course and had a go with them. And after a few rounds, I have to say I was pleasantly surprised with what I was finding. And here's what I want to do today. I want to compare those irons against my current irons, the PSi Tour, explain the differences that I'm seeing on the launch monitors, because I finally managed to get them on the launch monitors, have a proper morning of testing, and also the differences I was seeing on the course, how it could benefit your game if you're interested in this concept, and also just a little bit more general information around these clubs. Now, I've used the PSi Tour irons for a while now, since I got them really last year, and I love those irons. They are a fantastic iron. And when I started using the Cobra 1-length forged out on the course, they felt very similar in terms of feel. Now with a forged iron, you're always going to get that little bit of better feel. When you strike it out the center, it is always going to feel nice with a high quality forge. And these Cobras are just that. They feel fantastic when you strike them well. So in comparison to my PSi Tour irons, the feeling in between the two, there's very, very little difference indeed. But just how an iron feels, just how a club feels, isn't the be-all and end-all. So let's have a little bit of a comparison. Let's have a bit of a look at the differences between these irons just on the spec sheets. The way that I conducted the test in the range is I took the odd numbered irons, so the 9 iron, the 7 iron and the 5 iron, and compared them against each other. And as far as the lofts would suggest, the Cobra irons have a slightly stronger loft advantage. So they're the same loft in the 5 iron, 26 degrees. The Cobra are 1 degree stronger in the 7 iron and 1.5 degrees stronger in the 9 iron. Now this would suggest if you hit both these irons well out of exactly the same place on the face, the Cobra should go a little bit further if we were just determining what the loft would do. However, what you also have to bear in mind here is the length of the shaft. So the 9 iron length of shaft in the Cobra is the same as the 7 iron, and the 5 iron is the same length as the 7 iron as well. Where in the PSi set, it's more of a standard set that is progressively getting longer throughout those clubs. Now in my mind, the longer the shaft, the more club head speed you should be able to generate, and if the lofts are very similar, we're talking only a degree and a half difference, really that should mitigate the difference in the distances being hit. Now I'll throw both specs up on the screen here. You can see how the PSi Tour does get progressively longer, as you would expect, as the lofts begin to change. Now with the King Cobra irons, that's where it's slightly different. So every length is 37.25 inches and every lie angle is 62.5 degrees. It is only the loft that changes within these clubs. Also, the swing weight remains constant. From a visual perspective, both these irons look fantastic. If I was to put them both behind a ball, I'd be happy hitting either of them. Maybe because I've had them for longer, I would say that the PSi Tours do look a shade nicer, but I'm talking a very, very small amount. When you put the Cobras behind the ball, they look great. There's no denying that. But of course, the big difference is in just the overall length of the shaft. So when you're comparing the two 7 irons together, you can't really see a difference. They're both great forged irons. However, when you start to put the longer irons behind the ball with the 1 length, they do look so strange. To have that little loft on such a short iron, it does visually take a little bit of getting used to. And that strange feeling is only magnified when you go to the higher lofted irons. To stick a gap wedge, which I do have in the 1-length irons, but I've not put it into play yet, which is something I'll get onto. When you stick something with that high of a loft on, with that length of a shaft on behind the ball, it does look very strange. It looks alien. It looks different to everything that I've been playing with over the last almost 20 years. And that's no little thing just to brush over. You know, if you've been used to something for so long, putting something new into play which does look that unusual, a lot of people will instantly just be turned off by it and be like, well, you know what, I just don't think this is for me. And certainly to begin with, I was in that mindset. So I had to very much persevere and try and stick with it while I tested out these clubs. So I approached this comparison and a possible switch into new irons slightly differently. I didn't take them on the range first. I didn't use launch monitors to judge how far they were going, what the dispersion was like. I took them on the course first just to get a real visual impact and a real feel impact first. And what I found is after the initial shock of the looks, they performed very, very well. On the course, sometimes you're using feel a little bit more, but on the range, I was expecting when the closed data came out for the PSi Tours to still edge it because of the extra length and because it was just what I was more used to. And I was actually really surprised by the results when I got them on the launch monitor. I knew that they were performing well on the course, but obviously I didn't have time to test them fully against my PSi Tour irons. And I wasn't expecting there to be masses of difference. And in fact, I expected the PSi Tours to just be able to edge it on performance. Now, when I got them to the range, I wasn't really sure what to expect because I knew they'd been performing pretty well on the course, but obviously I hadn't had that chance to test them directly against the PSi Tour irons. And because I am still, more used to the PSi Tour irons because I like the look of them as well, I was expecting the TaylorMade irons just to edge it. However, the results were actually very, very similar. And in fact, arguments could be made that the one length irons did give better results overall as well. So the first thing we'll do here is we'll compare the one length 7 iron to the PSi 7 iron. Now the length of these clubs is very similar. The loft on the one length irons is slightly stronger, which could give a bit of a reason for some of the results we see here. But actually, they're very, very comparable and they're very, very similar. So the one length iron is 1/2 inch longer than the PSi 7 iron. It's also 1 degree stronger. So you'd expect it to go that little bit further. And that's what we saw. If you go straight to the distance column here, you will notice that overall carry distance was 163 out of the 5 recorded shots compared to 158 with the standard length PSi 7 iron. So a 5-yard increase. The dispersion side of this, all my misses on that day were left, and that's probably a quirk of some of the changes that I'm making to my swing. However, I had a couple of pulls left with the one length 7 iron and one big pull left with the standard length 7 iron. So all the misses there on average off to the left hand side, but actually on the screen, they weren't massive misses and they were all pretty similar when it did go offline. Spin rates slightly more on the PSI iron. Again, I think that's expected because of the difference in the lofts as well. And overall, ball speeds, launch angles, everything between those two clubs, there wasn't masses of difference between. But obviously with a one length iron, the big differences that you'd expect to see was at the lower end of the bag and the higher end of the bag. Now when I switched over to the 5 iron, this is where I started to see some real differences. Carry distances were slightly down on the single length. It was 3 yards less on average than the standard length 5 iron. So not again masses of difference, similar to what we were seeing on the 7 iron. One of the big differences was the dispersion, and this was very, very noticeable actually when I was on the screen. The single length irons was 4 yards left, 1.3 left, 2.2 right, 9.7 left, 1.2 right. I was hitting those shots and I felt I had a lot more control, and I think that's because of the length of the shaft. It is shorter. I was able to set up to it, although it does feel slightly odd again with that 7 iron moving it slightly further forward. I felt more comfortable because of the shorter length of shaft. And then when I was using my standard length 5 iron, I did feel the difference. I thought it was going to be more difficult to control. And then what I did is I switched it back round. So I went to a 9 iron in the one length and the standard length. And it was strange. It flipped around again. So my carry distances were up very, very slightly with the single length 9 iron. Maybe because of the length of shaft, being equivalent to a 7 iron, maybe that gave me that little bit more carry distance. Again, the differences were quite small. It was 5 yards on average overall. Dispersion was quite similar. I did hit a few more offline shots with these clubs, both of them as well. The peak height with the one length iron was a little bit higher, and it visually looked probably more higher than the results would suggest, only 2 yards on average. But on the course and on the driving range, that is something which I feel and which seems to be more prevalent. It does look to be a higher ball flight. When I came away and I looked at these results, I was quite surprised in many respects about how similar they were, but also how comfortable I felt after that test having the one length irons in the bag, because I was a little bit skeptical. There's absolutely no doubt about it. I still am not 100% convinced. But in my mind, I can see how using a one length iron, because of the setup advantages, because not having to change that much every time, it should be able to make you a little bit more of a consistent player. So moving into the start of this season, I will be using these one length irons. I want to get a little bit better fitted for them. Grip and shaft wise, I just want to make sure 100% there for me. I'm not massively keen on the grip which is on there at the moment, which is a blue lambkin. I'd just like to change that to a nice standard Tour velvet. That's the grip I like. It's a bit dull, I know, but that's the one I like. And also just do a little bit more testing, just to make sure that I'm making the right decision. And it's certainly true that these irons will not suit everyone. I mean, they have a more cavity back version, just a normal F7, which I think, I know Rick's tried and he does quite like, and it is a decent iron as well, so maybe that would suit more people. But just the look and just how they feel when you get set up.
Hey there.
It won't suit everyone. There's absolutely no doubt about it. But as always, I would recommend that people get tested, people get fitted. Because bear in mind that this comparison was between my irons and the one length irons. So this is not going to say that the one length irons will perform better against what you currently have in the bag. So if you are considering this, please make sure that you test them, and don't just think that cutting your irons all down to the same length will work, because you'll have to adapt lie angle. And remember, head density here is one of the key differences between the one length irons, from the 9 iron all the way down to the 4 iron, or the gap wedge all the way down to the 4 iron. I can't really get used to that gap wedge. But as always, please let me know what you think. I'd be very interested to hear your opinion, what you think about these one length irons, and if you want to give them a go as well. I think it's one of those new old breakthroughs, because like I said, it has been around before, this technology, that could potentially help a lot of people. Or it could just be one of those phases, one of those fads that go out of fashion. Maybe in 6 months I'll try another iron which are a normal length and be like, oh, what on earth was I doing? You know, these are the best things ever. But I think for now, this is something I want to explore a little bit more, because the early results are very positive. And I can feel myself being confident when using these clubs. There's absolutely no doubt about it. Actually gaining in confidence more and more and more. It is interesting. Right guys, please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Comment below. Follow me on my other social media platforms as well, which are all linked in the description below. And we will see you down here next time.